Because, the bottom line is, here's what I believe. And this came from the personal development industry. I believe the two most important times of your life is the moment you're born and the moment you figure out why.
Welcome back, everybody. We're joined here today by Dave Albin. Dave, it's nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Anthony, how are you doing?
I'm great today. How you doing,
Awesome.
Jason?
I'm doing pretty well, Dave. So we're excited to have you on here, and we're going to dive a little bit into your background, kind of learn about who you are, and then figure out what your life has been and get your story out there. Sound good?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So if you want to take a few minutes and kind of just talk about your background, where you're born and raised, the kind of some of the things that led you to be the person you are today.
Gotcha. Well, a couple of months, literally, you guys, before I was born, my biological father, we don't really know what happened. We just know from my mother told me that he had hurt his head. And so to save his life, they literally put a plate in his head. Now, this is in 1954. So there was a lot of pain associated with that plate. And he complained to Mom all the time about the pain. Well, one day he turned to her and he said, "I'm going to the grocery store." We never saw or heard from him again. So I have no information, recollection, pictures, anything about my biological father. So in that moment, I was born to a single mom. And we're in Hollywood, California. Mom's working at the Roosevelt Hotel. She's a server. I've got two other stepbrothers, not stepbrothers, but half brothers. Same mom, different dad. We had a cousin and my grandmother. We're all living in a one-bedroom apartment. There's 6 of us. And so, my mom and her sisters and brothers came from what I believe is the greatest generation of all time. They came through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. When all the men were off fighting the war, the women were doing everything, right? People don't realize that they were building tanks and planes and jeeps and munitions and all this stuff, right? And so they were very, very, very resourceful. And so, my mom was known as Rosie the Riveter, man. She worked for McDonnell Douglas during World War II. She built airplanes. And so, she was hardworking. But when you're working as a server to try to feed 6 people, it's not going to work. And so when I was 5 years old, she went to her oldest sister, Pat, my aunt, and she said, "Hey, will you adopt David?" And my aunt and my uncle, Bob and Pat Albin, agreed, and they did. So they moved me from Hollywood to Long Beach, California. So my dad, who's adopted me, right? He's highly decorated, World War II. He's a career military officer. We had a nice house. We had nice things. We went camping. I mean, my whole life just got incredibly better, obviously. And then when I was 11 years old, the first day of summer, 1964, a day I'll never forget. I was watching TV. I'm up early. I'm probably eating Captain Crunch or something, watching a black and white television. And Mom came in and said, "David, come to the kitchen. Your dad and I need to speak with you." And I went in and I sat down, and my mom put her hand on my arm and she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "David, what we need to tell you is we're not your parents." Okay, I'm 11 years old. What the hell does that mean? What do you mean you're not my parents? Of course you're my parents. It's like walking somebody outside and saying, "Yeah, the sky's not blue," right? Well, it looks pretty blue to me. Well, things, took a real interesting turn and twist in my life at that moment. Shortly after they told me this, they both started drinking. And that's when it really took a turn and a twist. Mom, Pat, she was kind of a happy drunk. She'd pass out at the kitchen table kind of a thing. Bob, he was an animal, man. He was not a nice guy when he was drinking. He was a super sweet dude when he was sober. Great guy, but pour alcohol in him, and he turned into a real, just wasn't a good guy. I'll just keep it there. And so they went to the grocery store one day, and I watched these 2 people turn into these animals by drinking this stuff. I have no idea what alcohol is. I don't know. So they went to the grocery store, and I was curious. And that day I went over. I knew where they were hiding it. They were hiding it in plain sight. And I went over and I got a coffee cup. It was brandy. They had a half gallon of it. Poured it in that cup and I downed it. You guys, I never had a chance, ever. I believe I was an alcoholic right on the spot. At a young age, I started chasing it right there. Once it was in my body, it just took over. And so, by the time I was a junior in high school, I got kicked out. I started hanging around with wrong people. I started doing weird, bizarre, crazy shit. And my school knew that I was dangerous, so they kicked me out. I went and got a job at a big grocery store. I joined a union. I actually got a really good job, the day I got kicked out of high school. But what's interesting is that I was already an entrepreneur. So when I got kicked out of high school, I didn't care. I literally didn't. There was a song by, what's his name? Simon and Garfunkel. Paul Simon. He wrote a song, and the lyrics was, "When I think back to all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can think at all." Well, that was like my theme song, right? It was like, man, I was living that part of my life, and but I had an entrepreneurial spirit at a young age. So, like the first job I ever had, I had a paper route. Well, that's a full-time job. You're doing that 7 days a week as a kid. Right? You got to ride to a location, pick up your papers. You got to fold them, put a rubber band around them, pack them in your saddlebags, load them on your bike, and go deliver them. You had to collect all the money. You had to knock on doors when new people moved into the neighborhood. You were an entrepreneur, right? So, and then I lived across the street from a golf course. And here's the thing I learned about golfers at a young age. They suck. And good for me because, man, they would hit balls over the fence, right? So I'd ride my bicycle around the perimeter, and guess what I'd find? Little white things that were worth money. So I'd bring them home, I'd clean them up, and I'd go back to the golf course. And the boxes they came in, they throw them out in the trash. Well, I'd get them. I'd pick them up, and then I'd take my balls and I'd put them back into those boxes. And I'd like label them, right? It was Titleist and Wilson and Dunlap and Max Flies. And then I'd go back to the parking lot and I'd sell them back to the golfers, right? So there was an entrepreneurial spirit there. My mom grew beautiful flowers in the backyard. Pat Albin, man, you can understand, she came through the Great Depression, so she knew how to do everything. She taught me how to clean, how to sew, how to do laundry, how to cook, just all of it. She was incredibly brilliant. And so one of the things, again, she grew beautiful flowers in the backyard. Well, she would cut them for me. And how she would do it, she would cut the flower at an angle. Not at the bottom, at an angle. And what that did is it opened up more surface area for water to get into the flower, right? And then she'd arrange them. She had a beautiful eye for color. And then she'd tie them up, and she'd put them in a bucket. And then she'd put water in it, but she'd put about this much 7-Up. She'd take about a half a 7-Up, and she'd pour it in the water. Well, what that did is that my flowers would outlast the local florist 3-1. So the kid out on the street corner is selling flowers that outlast the florist, and the florist never figured out what we were doing, right? So that lived with me. And here's what I learned at a young age from that: there's money out there, go get it. And I learned that 10 or 11 years old. So again, when I got kicked out of high school, I didn't care. Well, to move this forward and to fast forward this, on June 8th, 1988, I was in my third marriage. I was married to a woman. She was a bartender. And remember, man, I'm drinking and drugging and, I'm carrying on. So marrying a bartender is not out of the realm of possibility, right? She had 3 kids. I loved them. They were my stepkids. And when I woke up that morning, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I'm living in the basement. They're living upstairs because they didn't want to be around me. And so when I woke up that morning, I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do? I can't live with the pain anymore. The physical and emotional pain was excruciating. And so the only thought I had in that moment was put a bullet in your head. So I loaded my pistol. I'm ready to do it. And I'm not wrestling with, heaven or hell and any of this other stuff, right? I got pain. I want it to stop. This is the answer for me in that moment. Well, it dawns on me. If I do that, if I pull that trigger, yeah, my troubles may be over, but those 3 kids and their mom, their troubles are just starting. I'm going to kill them too. And so I'm like, you can't do that, man. You got to figure out another way. You can't ruin their life. That's wrong. And so as I'm struggling with that, the next thought I had was, well, why don't you call Alcoholics Anonymous? And you know what's interesting, you guys? I didn't even know who the hell AA was. I didn't know anybody in AA. I'd never been to AA, yet there's the thought. And so I did. I called AA, and I got this incredible human being on the other end of the phone. And I've nicknamed her Madge over the years. And the reason I call her Madge is because she talked like this. She had that real raspy voice, right? She probably smoked 2 packs of Camel non-filters a day, right? So her voice was pretty raspy. But man, I tell you what, she was a badass, and she was the gatekeeper. So her job was to interview you, and if you were bad enough, she'd call somebody, one of the guys in AA, to come pick you up and take you to a meeting. And that's exactly what she did. So on June 8th of 1988, I went to my very first AA meeting, and it stuck. And so here in 2023, on June 8th, I celebrated 35 years. So here this year in 24, if I don't drink and I don't die, I'll celebrate 36 years, right?
Congratulations. So, that's a big achievement. I want to make sure that we call that out for you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's, the chances of making it were pretty astronomical, especially when you have alcohol. Alcohol is one thing, right? Because you can die from delirium tremors just from, the recovery side of it with withdrawals. But you throw in cocaine and heroin, and it doesn't make it any better, I can tell you that. So anyway, they grabbed a hold of me. They loved me until I could love myself. And again, I made it. Well, what happened is at the same time, I had insomnia, right? Because my sleep patterns were all over the place. And so I'm up late one night in 1988, and there he is, a young, vibrant Tony Robbins. Now, not all your listeners are going to know who Tony Robbins is, but if you search him, you'll find it. He's probably one of the top motivational speakers in the last 30 years, by far. Pretty interesting guy. And so, honestly, when I first listened to him, I didn't even like him. I thought he was a pompous ass, man, to be candid. He's all motivated and he's all encouraging, and I feel like shit, right? So I'm not very motivated. But he said 2 things, man, that really got me. The first thing he said is, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And I went, whoa, are you talking to me? Because that's what I was doing with drugs and alcohol, right? I was either trying to get out of pain or I was trying to chase a little pleasure. So that resonated with me. And then from there, he said, the way humans make decisions, they make decisions 2 ways. They make them either out of inspiration or desperation. And I went, whoa, okay, he's talking to me again. And so I was pretty desperate. So, I bought his program. And to date this, man, they sent me a big box because this is a 30-day program. And so you went through it, on your own at home. And it came on these little white things called cassette tapes, right? And some of your listeners aren't going to know what those are either. They're in the Smithsonian. They're right next to reel-to-reel and 8-track tapes. So, yeah, I went through it. And I did what the man taught me to do, and it worked. Well, I ended up loaning that program to a buddy of mine in AA. We were talking one day. He goes, what's wrong with you, man? What's going on with you, man? You're real motivated. You're very encouraging. All the members of AA are really listening to you. He goes, what's going on? I go, I'm just listening to this guy named Tony Robbins. And he goes, hey, man, I know who Tony Robbins is. I bought his book, but I never read it. I said, okay, well, how often does that show up in your life, right? He goes, all the time. So anyway, I loaned him my program, and he went through it. Well, 7 years later, right, this is all happening in 1988, 1989. In 1995, he called me on the phone. He goes, hey, man, did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town? And I'm like, no, I had no clue. He goes, dude, come on. You got me into this. You got to go with me. Let's go see him. And I said, sure, yeah, let's go do it. And so he goes, great, I'll call you back. I'll make the arrangements. Well, he calls me back like an hour later, and he goes, done. We pick up the tickets at will call. Here's what they told us to do. Number 1, drink a lot of water. You're going to need to hydrate. Okay, drink a lot of water. Got it. What else? Bring snacks. Why? Because we're going to spend a lot of time in the room. Now, I'm laughing because anybody that's ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar knows how ridiculous that is. You will spend a lot of time in the room, guaranteed. And then he said, be ready to play out and bring a good attitude. And I said, well, okay, Dan, well, how much was the ticket? He said, $695. This is in 1995. I don't know, guys. What's that worth today? Like 1.2, 1.3 million? I mean, I don't know, right?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly, right? Buy Bitcoin, right? So I'm like, cool. He goes, don't worry, you pay me back. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'll pay you. It's no big deal. Well, the big day comes, right? We get there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight, right? 10 hours, right? Bring snacks. You're going to spend a lot of time in a room. You'll starve to death. So next thing I hear Tony say was, take your shoes off. Now, let me back up. When Dan called me on the phone to tell me he took over the arrangements, just as he got ready to get off the phone, he goes, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you something. We're going to be doing a fire walk. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm not saying anything, but my brain goes, oh, hell no. No. We're not doing any fire walk. I can tell you that. That's not going to happen. Now, what's interesting about that is I don't even know what a fire walk is. What does that mean? I don't know, but fire and walk in the same sentence didn't sound like anything I wanted to do. Most of my decisions are all based on fear, right? So I'm not doing it. But I don't want Dan to think I'm a coward, so I'm not going to say anything about it. I just kind of went along with it. I'm being subservient, right? Like, yeah, sure, Dan. Yeah, firewalk, sure. Sounds interesting. Well, hell, that night, boom, Tony says, take your shoes off, right? And he's been preparing you for 10 hours for the firewalk. And he says, take your shoes off. And I'm like, oh, no. No. I know where you're going with that, pal. I'm not taking my shoes off. That ain't going to happen. Well, I got a problem. I'm in a room with 3,500 people. Guess what they're doing?
Taking their shoes off.
Damn shoes off. I'm like, people, no, don't go towards the light. You're falling for this shit, right? And so it gets worse. So what am I going to do? Well, okay, I'm wrestling with it, right? Because I'm not going to do it. My plan is I'll go out there and I'm going to hide in the back somewhere because no one's going to know. Well, other than me, right? So I'm like, so just chill out, take your shoes off, because if you don't, everybody going out there is going to see you don't have your shoes off, and they're going to know you're a coward. So we can't have that, right? So I take my shoes off. Well, as he's getting everybody to go out there, guess what he gets everybody to start doing? Chanting and clapping. So now you've got 3,500 people walking out into this giant parking lot where the firewalk's going to take place going, yes, and I'm walking out there going, no, we ain't doing this. Well, it gets worse. Because when you get out there, he's got African drummers. So now you got everybody clapping, chanting, and the vibration of the drums. Dun, 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 dun. It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. What a freaking dog and pony show this is. Well, so I'm sticking with my plan. I ditched my friend. Very easy to lose in 3,500 people. And I went and stood in the back. Right? Well, how this is set up, to firewalk 3,500 people, they build a giant fire over in the corner of this parking lot. It's huge. And they burn it all day. So, that big pit is probably 35 feet wide, 70 feet long. And they just keep throwing wood, hardwood on it, cord after cord after cord of wood, and it burns all day. Well, at the end of the night, it renders. And there's a giant pile of blue coals. It's gorgeous, right? So what they do is they take wheelbarrows over to that pit, and they load the coals in a wheelbarrow. And then they bring a wheelbarrow in between 2 lanes of sod, of grass, about 3 feet wide, 15 feet long. And they just take a flathead shovel, man, from that wheelbarrow, and they sprinkle those coals on top of the grass, and that's what you walk on, right? Well, I'm in the back, and it's going. It's full tilt, right? People are already firewalking. The drums are going. People are chanting. People are screaming. When they walk and they get to the celebration, and they're jumping up and down and celebrating like kids at Christmas. So, and the fire's going. I mean, all your senses are going nuts. Well, I'm hiding in the back. Well, here's what Tony Robbins knows. Why did Tony Robbins bring the firewalk into his events? Because he knows it's been around for 1,000 years, firewalk, if you research it. And he also knows that that's probably one of the most life-changing experiences on earth. And he knows it. So I brought it into his seminars. He also knows there's people like me, the cowards, who are hiding in the back. So what the hell does he do? He trains people to come find you. No shit. I'm back there minding my own business thinking I got it all figured out. Nope, I sure don't. because here comes this guy out of nowhere. And he makes eye contact with me, and I'm pretty sure Robbins trains him. Hey, when you make eye contact with these cowards, don't take your eyes off them, right? And he's walking at me, man. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And so he gets about 20 feet from me, and he looks at me kind of weird, right? And he's like, "Are you okay?" And when we're not okay, what do we say?
You say, "I'm okay."
Yes.
I'm okay. I'm fine. All good here, man. Nothing to see. Move along, dude. And he goes, "So, hey, man, are you going to walk tonight?" Goes right for the kill shot, right? And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm not walking tonight." And he goes, "Hey, man, that's cool. No problem. We don't want you to do anything you don't want to do." And I thought, oh, okay. This guy's going to get me out of here. No, he's not. He's tricking me. Because the next question, this stranger, by the way, I don't know who this guy is to this day. I wish I did. Because without him, all the lives that I've been a part of changing would have never happened. And the question he asked me was, well, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I thought, well, sure, let's watch these people burn their feet off. That'll be fun. And he goes, hey, man, you can't see anything from way back here, right? I can't. I got 3,500 people standing in front of me. I can hear it. They're chanting. They're screaming. They're clapping. You know, the drums are going. I can see the big fire. And so he goes, well, listen, man, just get in line, right? I fell for it. He goes, and eventually you'll get up there, you'll be able to see it, which in his defense, he's telling the truth. And so I did. I got in line. And I'm just kind of walking along, and the next thing you know, another stranger comes up to me, and he whispers in my ear, and he goes, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And pew, this guy just disappeared into the night. And I'm like, what? What do you mean he knows when you're ready? When he says go, you go. What does that mean? So I'm kind of walking along, you guys, and all of a sudden I get to a point. Again, I can't see in front of me. I got 1,000 people in front of me. But I can see it at an angle, right? And they're doing it, man. They are walking on fire. Every race, every creed, every color, age-wise. And my brain is like, this can't be happening. Because I've never seen or witnessed anything like this in my life, right? So I'm mesmerized. It's like the car accident you say you're not going to stare at, right? And we do. I just staring at it. Well, I'm kind of walking along, and I'm staring at these people walking, and all of a sudden, boom! Guess where I am? Front of the
Walking.
line. Well, not quite, but I'm standing at the front of the line, right? I'm right there. Well, there's a trainer there, right? And I'm looking down at the lane. It's 3 feet wide, 15 feet long, and the coals are on top, and they're bright red. They're glowing red. And there's a wheelbarrow there. You can feel the heat coming off. It got real fast. My heart is beating so hard, I know it's going to jump out of my chest. I'm scared to death. Well, as I'm staring into the abyss, the trainer yells at me. He goes, eyes up! And so I pull my eyes up. Well, I'm in a room with Tony for 10 hours. Guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. Don't stare at what you fear. Look to the celebration end. That's where the reward is. So now my eyes are up, and he goes, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. And I went, yes. Well, he could tell. He's a trainer. He knew I was leaving a lot on the table. He knew I wasn't in a peak state. And so he screamed at me, got right in my face. And so I threw my hands in the air, and I screamed yes as loud as I could. And he goes, go, go, go. Pooh. I took off. Remember the guy? He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. I did. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take the first step, oh, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I absolutely promise you. So they position 2 people at the end of the lane to stop you, to catch you. Hell, if they hadn't, I'd have walked all the way to Albuquerque at that point. They stop you, and they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so I'm wiping my feet, and I'm celebrating, and all of a sudden it dawns on me. I burnt myself really bad, right? And I look at my foot, and it's dirty, but there's no burns. I'm having ghost pains. Oh, it's my other foot. No, it's dirty too. Not one burn. So I'm looking back at the coals going, I just walked on coals that are 1,000 degrees, and I have no clue how I did it. Right? Ever done something like that? You do something really cool, and you're like, hey, I did that. And you take credit for it even. And you're like, yep, that's me. That's that guy. I did that, but no clue. Well, so now I'm standing down in the celebration end. There's 3,500 people down there standing. They're still cheering. They're jumping up and down. And so now you're part of what I call the Firewalk community congruency, right? Because we're all celebrating the same thing. We had achieved something at such a high level, and now we're all part of it, right? So our self-worth, our self-confidence, and our self-belief got raised together, collectively. So we're celebrating together. But let me tell you, here's where it gets really interesting, though, the next day. This is called Unleash the Power Within, the Firewalk Experience, 4-day event. This was day 1, the night thereof. Now we're on day 2. Day 2, I'm in the foyer the next day, getting ready to go into the venue. I've never seen or witnessed anything like it in my life. Unbelievable. I mean, people were getting along humanistically unlike anything I'd ever experienced. People are talking, they're hugging, they're laughing, they're crying, they're talking about their fears, they're talking about the Firewalk, and I'm sitting back and I'm listening, and I'm like, okay, time out here. Did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Is that what happened? Well, we sure did. And to this day, I've never seen or witnessed anything like it, right? So if you take March of 2020, right, and how everybody got shredded because now we're all different in some way. Like, you know, I love Donald Trump. I hate Donald Trump. I wear a mask. I don't wear a mask. I wear 2 masks. I got a vaccine. I got 9 boosters. I mean, shut up already. It just shredded people, right? Well, that next morning was the total polar opposite of what happened to this country in March of 2020. And so Tony's a master. He knows. He knew that Firewalk was going to do that. So he's got them right where he wants them, right? Because now the belief system is, okay, if I can walk on coals that are 1,000 degrees and not burn myself, what else can I do? Mm-hmm. And so that's where he's got them. Well, I went on to meet one of Tony's trainers later in the event. Super, super sweet guy by the name of Ted Macy, him and his wife, Mary. So I'm talking to Ted, and I'm like, dude, you get to be in this environment on a regular basis, don't you? He goes, I sure do. He goes, and you know what? You might have a shot at it. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you see all those people standing over there wearing those black shirts with the pink writing on the back? Yeah. He goes, dude, they're volunteers. They're just like you. They came to an event, and they filled out an application, and they got approved. So go home, call Robbins. They'll send you the app, fill it out, send it back. Who knows? Exactly what I did. 9 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail that said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins Companies. Well, color my ass happy. There I am, man, at a Tony Robbins seminar as a volunteer. Well, the application is pretty detailed. They really want to know who you are. And so I had a security background, I had a military background, and because of those 2 things, they put me on the security team helping take care of Tony's celebrities, which is a whole nother podcast I could talk about. And then because I lived on a farm, right, I knew how to use tools. I knew what a log splitter was. I know how to use a hatchet. I know what kindling is. I got 2 wood stoves in my properties in the different buildings. So they put me on the fire building team, which is exactly what I wanted. And boom, that was it. Shortly after that, I became a subcontractor in 96, 97. 2003, Robbins offered me the fire captain position, which meant that I would take over all of TR's firewalks globally. And because I was homeschooling my kids at the time, and I told them that could be a complication, they offered to pay for my kids to go on the road. So there I am with my wife and my 2 kids on the road with Tony Robbins. In fact, their first event with the kids was in Sydney, Australia. So, my kids have been pretty deprived. Pray for them. And so that was in 03, right? So I took over all of the firewalks. And in 05, we set the world record. We went to London, and we firewalked the largest crowd that's ever been firewalked in the world, and that was 12,300 people. Now, I want to disclose, Guinness was not there, Guinness Book was not there, but I can tell you this, that was the largest firewalk that had ever been done in the world. And the only thing that's ever come close to that's another Tony Robbins seminar with 10,000. And that was in 05. And then in 2014, my life took another incredible turn. I'm driving down the road, and Google calls me. Really? Google called, haven't they called you guys? I mean, right? It's like, what? So they want to know, are you the Dave Albin that does the firewalk for Tony Robbins? Yeah, what can I do for you? Well, if you're not under any contractual obligation or non-compete, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you. Okay. Well, homeboy's a free agent. What you got? And so they hired me. We actually ended up doing a glass walk because they had 148 executives that were graduating in Mountain View, and they wanted to do the event in the middle of the day. And I go, well, I don't do firewalks in the middle of the day. That's a safety issue. But I tell you what we could do, if you want to create a paradigm shift experience, we could do the glass walk. They're like, glass walk? You mean like walking on broken glass? I'm like, yep. And they're like, ooh, tell us about that. So, yeah, I ended up doing 2 glass walks for them that year and the following year. So that's when in 2014, that's when Firewalk Productions was born. I went back to Tony and said, I love you. And he goes, you're leaving, aren't you? I go, yep, it's time for me to go, man. And so I retired in 2014. Firewalk Productions was born, and no pun intended, but we've been going hot and heavy ever since. Shortly after that, we went to NASA, and we went to Notre Dame and Virginia Tech and Remax and Microsoft and Heineken, and the next thing you know, you're on the brainwave exchange. So you just don't know where it's going to go. So, yeah.
I got a question for you. How different was, if you do the firewalks at all these other big companies compared to Tony Robbins? Like, do you get to see the second day and how it's changed all the people like you did in that on that first
Sometimes, night? Yeah. We hear feedback. I've heard everything from one company that told me that we did a firewalk for 350 of their sales and marketing people, and they said over the next 90 days they had an increase in sales of 18%.
Wow.
Okay. But that's not the norm. I mean, we don't get that kind of feedback sometimes. I just had a relationship with the CEO, and he was keeping me abreast of what was happening. The difference is that I'm on stage and not Tony. So I'm doing all the training. In fact, I just came off of 2 gigs. We were down in South Florida. We just did a really cool firewalk for EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, if you guys have ever heard of EO, right, out of South Florida. So they had 130, 40 people, their members down in Miami. So we just did that one on the 21st of the month. And then we came back to Fort Lauderdale and did a gig for HIT Insurance. In fact, I just got back a couple of days ago. So, those events, what's really cool is that they bring their families. They bring kids. In fact, I've got a video I'll shoot you guys that one of the videographers did for EO. Did an incredible job of capturing, because I also bring the board break into the firewalk. And the reason I did that is because now it's 2 powerful experiences, and I can create a higher paradigm shift, because the board break, it's just a martial arts thing, right? Every dojo in America does it. But I have them write something on front of the board they want to move towards. I have them write something on back of the board they want to move away from. And then I have them write anybody's name on the board they're in conflict with. So many humans in this world are walking around with anger and frustration and resentment for another human being. Well, that's not going to help your psyche. It's got to go. You got to stop. You got to forgive them and move on. So I give them an opportunity that night to do that, to give it to the fire. And then to create the rite of passage, I have them write anybody's name on the board that they've lost. So that creates the ancestral side of the experience. So we take them out, they break the board, we circle them back, they do the firewalk, and then they get to throw the board into the fire. And we capture that on video, and we get pictures of it, and then that way they have that. The other thing we give them, too, is one of these. I don't know if you can see that. It just says, I firewalked in 2024 with EO or HIT or Microsoft or whatever. And they have coals from from my hopper from the firewalk, and we talked a little bit before we started recording about so where am I now? What's going on now? Well, corporate America has been really good to me, no doubt about it, and we still do that, right? Companies can call me and say, Dave, we got a breakdown. We're launching a new product. We want to motivate our team, whatever. Then they hire me, and I sit down with the CEO or the event planner within the company and say, all right, tell me what's going on. Help me, and I will design the firewalk experience around what's ever going on with you guys. Well, recently, about 2 months ago, I was on a podcast. And after we recorded, she asked me a really interesting question, Natalie did. She said, hey, Dave, have you ever done a firewalk for veterans? And I said, you mean specifically? And she said, yeah. And I go, no, why? She goes, dude, we've got 200 vets. And, you know, the suicide rate with vets is off the chain. Well, the number that you hear in the streets is 22 a day. Guess what? It's not true. It's not even close. And here's why. That's only if they leave a note. Well, hell, over 50% of them, you guys don't leave any notes, right? So it's up closer to like in the mid-40s a day. And so you might hear something in a minute. I'm about 100 miles from Fort Bragg, and I'm up in the Appalachian Mountains, and the boys and girls like to come and fly these mountains in the F-18s. And so they literally like to fly right over the top of my house. Nice. I can hear them in the background there, right? So the bottom line was, as I said, yeah, let me think about it for a minute, and I'll come back. I'll do it. I'm in. I just need some time to process. Well, that night when I went to bed, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I came up with Operation Do No Harm, specifically for 4 categories of people who need it. 1, veterans. 2, first responders. 3, single moms. 4, kids that have been abused and neglected. And so I'm like, so why does a vet take their life? They lose purpose. It's real simple. I've been in the personal development industry for over 3 decades. I know why. I learned from Robbins and many other motivational type, inspirational type folks. So what you know, they go to basic training. They learn how to become a killer. They get deployed. They get over there. They're exposed to war, which is horrible. I'm a vet myself. I get it. And so they move as a unit. They see each other get blown away, and all of a sudden, boom, they come home, and they're fragmented. And now they've lost contact, or at least that closeness, with their fellow men and women who were over there together. And so their purpose starts to fall, depression sets in, and then they start drinking and drugging, and then we lose them. So how do we shift that? How do we change that? We bring them into an event. And one of the first things I'm going to do at the Firewalk is I'm going to have them take an oath. I'm going to have them raise their hand and promise to do no harm. And the beauty about that is when you do that with a first responder or a vet, they'll live up to that creed, to that code of honor. And then we're going to do the board break. We're going to do the Firewalk. I've went to some companies that I work with, like these guys here. Zippo lighter, right? These guys are cool, man. They're going to make a lighter that's going to say Operation Do No Harm. When I went to them and asked them, I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Are you guys interested? And they said, oh, hell yes. So they invited me up to Bradford, Pennsylvania, where the Zippo manufacturer is. Oh, my gosh. I mean, what a cool company, right? They've been around a long time. The founder started the company in 1931. They made their first lighter in 1932, during the middle of the Great Depression. And as of last year in 2023, when I was there, they've manufactured 700 million lighters, man, right? So they're a really cool company. They also want to support vets and first responders, so they're all in. And then I've approached some other companies. Actually, one of the companies approached me, the American Weed Company. They're also very, very focused on veterans, right? They're creating a cannabis strain that's specifically for PTSD, complex PTSD, depression, and suicide. And the beauty of what American Weed has done is the strand is consistent. That's always been lacking. In other words, it was always a little off until now. These guys finally figured out how to make a strand and keep it consistent so that the result of the cannabis is it's working. Obviously, what would you rather have one of your relatives on? Cannabis or fentanyl? Right? So yeah, they're really cool. I reached out to Black Rifle Coffee. I reached out to MIT 45. It's a Kratom company. Both of those guys are in Salt Lake. I reached out to doTERRA, which is a essential oil company. They're actually going to make an oil specifically for the Firewalk. So as soon as somebody does the Firewalk, when you do that, you're in an absolute peak state. Incredible. And I'll give you an example of how you can show and prove that to yourself and your listeners. Go Google Oprah's Firewalk. Regardless of what you think or feel about her, whether you love her, hate her, or somewhere in the middle, just go watch the Firewalk because it depicts what somebody goes through. Because at the end of the Firewalk, she's like a little kid celebrating. And before that, she's losing her shit. She is scared to death. She was pretty much almost exactly like I was. But right after she finishes the Firewalk, within seconds, she makes one of the biggest business decisions of her life. So my point of that is that once you're in that peak state and you smell that oil, it's going to anchor it, right? We all know. You ever been somewhere you smell something and reminds you of your grandma's house?
Yep.
Same thing. It's the most powerful sense we have. And so we're going to create an oil so that those people can smell it. And then a week later, if they want to go back to that moment, to take them back to that incredible moment of the Firewalk, boom, all they have to do is smell it. So it's going to be absolutely incredible with that. So that's kind of where we are. We've already scheduled our first event for 200 vets in Modesto, California for April 6th. And we have several other sponsors. MIT 45, we invited them. Black Rifle, we invited. doTERRA, we invited. American, we invited. We also invited C3 Insurance out of San Diego. They're coming in with a production company. So a bunch of companies, corporations have stepped up because they get it. What do you want to do? You want to get your brand in front of a noble cause and make yourself and your company look really, really good? Because the bottom line is that when you sponsor something like this, right, and you get your employees involved, they're involved. It makes them feel good. That makes them feel like they're part of actually saving people's lives. And so there's a great reward. And companies do stuff like that all the time, right? They sponsor all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're in the process of putting it out to corporate America and said, want to bring us into your city? Pick a category. Who do you want to support? Who do you want to save their life? You want to do vets? You want to do first responders? You want to do some kids? You want to do some single moms? Or maybe both, right? Single moms and the kids go really well together. So that's my story, and that's where we are, and I'm sticking with it.
That's a really, really great story. Definitely been through some things and seen some things. I had a question specifically about the sort of the mentality that you get in when you finally do the Firewalk. And so you're sort of gripped by the fear initially of, oh my God, I don't want to walk over this fire because it's going to hurt, it's going to burn, it's going to be awful. And then I sort of imagine you get very caught up in the moment. Like you've got the trainer who's like, getting you fired up and yelling at you, and then he says go, and then I assume you don't really have a whole lot of time to think about it. You just sort of react in the moment. And my question is, how would you advise people to do that sort of thing when they're not at a 3,500 person Firewalk, when there's the whole environment that's sort of pumping them up? If you're just in your day-to-day life, how do you get yourself in that mentality to not look at the fire and to just go when someone's not yelling in your ear?
Well, here's what we know. What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. Period. Ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. You don't become a Navy SEAL by sitting in the classroom. I mean, that's part of it. No, you become a Navy SEAL when they take your happy ass out into the waters off the coast of San Onofre at 3 o'clock in the morning and dump you in, and it's pitch black. You can't see anything. And then they very affectionately tell you about all the species of sharks that are living and inhabiting those waters. Oh, wow, how nice. Right? That's scary shit. And again, so it all comes back. What doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. And so it's like, how do you live your life? I'm 70, guys. Guess how many medications I'm on?
0.
Nice.
How did I do that?
Very nice.
Well, I've gone back to the things that keep us well. We don't realize people get sucked into, you know what? Because they've been told, oh, take this, take that, take this one. Oh, you're having effects. We'll take this one. No. They're treating symptoms. They're never going to cure anything. I've been following a guy I really like. He's super. Hopefully I'll make contact with him someday, Gary Brecka. And Gary's done some things, and I'll share some information with your audience right now, and it's free. Not a dime do they have to pay me for any of what I'm about to share. So I get asked all the time, Dave, what's your routine? What do you do every day? Well, one of the first things I do, I learned from Gary, I get up and I expose my upper torso to the morning sunlight. That first 45 minutes of sunlight is super, super good for you. So I just expose myself to it. I also do 3 sets of 30 diaphragmatic breaths. That's a total of 90 breaths. So I'm oxygenating my body at a cellular level. And let me say something that's really important about that. Disease does not exist where oxygen is present. Let me say that again a little louder for the people in the back. Disease does not exist where oxygen is present. So what I'm doing is I'm breathing really hard. I'm forcing air down deep into my diaphragm, into the bottom part of my lungs, which looks like this. And it's hard. It doesn't feel that good. And so I do 30 breaths. And at the end, I take a nice deep breath in and I hold my breath. I do that 3 times, a total of 90 breaths, and I hold my breath 3 times. And I'm doing that while I'm exposing my upper torso to the sunlight. Then I go to the other side of my house, my cabin up here in the mountains, and I put my feet on the ground, on barefoot. It's called grounding. It's called earthing. Everything that moves in our body is from electricity. We're a giant cell of electricity. Well, we wear rubber shoes. And when we wear rubber shoes, we're now disconnected from the planet. You need to go put your feet on the planet. At least I do 9 minutes a day, and I also do some more meditative breathing when I'm doing that. So now I've got sunlight, I've got grounding, I come in, I meditate, I listen to some sound therapy, and you guys probably see this coming. I also live in the Appalachian Mountains, and the water coming into my cabin is mountain water, mountain spring water. And I have no problem telling your audience, if you're drinking tap water from a city municipal tap, do whatever you can to improve upon it. Because if you're consuming fluoride and chlorine and all the other chemicals that are in that water, your body's got to deal with that. And it's not doing what it's supposed to do. I drink spring water, man. You know what I mean? It's what we were just, it's our ancestors, that's what we drank. They didn't drink water that had been influenced by a municipal organization. No. And then of course I take a nice hot shower, and then I finish it with a cold shower. Now the water temperature of the water coming into my home is right now it's 56 degrees, which is perfect. 3 minute cold shower. And I start off and that water hits me right there between the eyes. And guess what it does? Every single time. It takes my breath away. So then your body goes in. And, we know, if you do a little research, there's plenty of information out there about how good cold water plunges and showering is for you. So that's my day. And then I also pay attention to what goes in here. I'm a good steward of that because I learned a long time ago, again, being in Tony's environment, that everything we consume, everything that goes in my mouth does one of 2 things. It either cleanses me or it clogs me. And that's it. And then, of course, Gary goes on to tell you, some other things, too, about foods and vitamins and, nutritional stuff. But that's pretty much my daily routine.
That's super cool. And it's something that I've been trying to take on a lot myself. I've heard a lot about grounding. I saw something on the internet once where they took a blood panel of somebody before and after grounding, and you see how the red blood cells will distribute more evenly after 10 minutes of bare feet on the ground. So this isn't woo-woo, right? Like there's science that backs this stuff up.
Well, there's evidence. If you have a dog and the dog lives inside the whole time, they get cancer. If you put them outside and let their paws touch the ground, it's the evidence is there. You're absolutely right. Because what is that cell? It's full of electricity. It's got energy all the way around it. And so it has to be balanced. And you have to connect back to the earth. I think you should do it every day. I took it a step further. I went and got grounding sheets and a pillowcase.
I've heard about that.
So I sleep on it. And so there's a plug that goes into the ground of your electrical plug. which is connected to the one outside that goes down into the ground, right? So, yeah, I've got some grandkids, and I believe my purpose is to be there when they graduate from high school and when they get married. And so I've got to do some things to ensure that I do that, and I owe it to them. And so, I found a really powerful why. Because, the bottom line is, here's what I believe. And this came from the personal development industry. I believe the two most important times of your life is the moment you're born and the moment you figure out why. And if you keep striving, you'll figure it out why. It may take a while. It may not happen in a week or a month or even a year. But eventually you'll come to terms with what that why is all about. So, just take care of yourself and find out what's going on out there. And, because I believe if you help enough people get what they want in life, you'll always get what you want. When I go to these seminars and I do all this and I change their lives with the firewalks and all this stuff, it feels phenomenal. It's such a great feeling, right? And so all we're really doing is, hopefully while we're on this planet, we figure out how to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. If you think that new Corvette is going to make you happy, you're off base, man. There may be a temporary high, maybe, because of the chemicals that are released in your head, but that's not long term. Not going to be long term. We just did this gig down for EO, and they brought a bunch of kids. We walked 2 4-year-olds. Can you imagine being 4 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old at a firewalk with your parents? Break a board, go throw it in the fire, walk across it. You think that's going to influence a kid about what they're capable of doing?
100%.
Of course it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And I get to do that shit, right? So,
amazing.
One of the last things Tony said to me when I retired was, he said, "Albie, with great wisdom comes great responsibility, man. Make us proud." And I think I've done that. I really think I've done that.
That's good stuff. So what can we and our listeners do to help you accomplish, your future goals, or just be better people?
Obviously, if there's somebody out there and they want to bring a firewalk to, their company and their people, we can do that. But moreoverly, what we'd really love to see is companies, jumping on board and going, okay, we get it. Operation Do No Harm. I have a cousin that was, in Afghanistan, or a brother or an uncle or a dad is a veteran or a first responder, or, I grew up with a single mom, or I was a kid that was abused, whatever. So if they can find one of those categories that resonates with them, then that they want to bring their company in, bring us into your city and sponsor an event. And we'll come in and we'll do all the heavy lifting, do all the stuff, and then your company will get credit for it. And so again, when you do that, you have a company and you have X amount of people and they get involved with all that, man, it's going to make them look and feel amazing. It just does automatically, because they know there's a huge suicide rate with those 4 categories, and who's going to take care of them? The government? Really? Please.
Yeah.
I'm not political. I don't play on either party because they're both wrong. Right? As long as you play into that game, right? As long as you got somebody else to blame, it's the blame game. Tony talks about it all the time. That's how they demonize people. The government got a whole bunch of people to hate a certain man. They did the same thing during Vietnam. Just go back. History repeats itself, right? Because what did they do in Vietnam? Well, they had to demonize the Vietnamese people, the North Vietnamese, and they called them the little yellow men, little yellow man. Well, so you know what I mean? They took away that they're humans. And of course, so, again, they've done the same thing. And again, if you want to hate Donald Trump, if you want to use hate him. That's up to you, but that's on you. That's probably not a good idea. To hate anything or anybody is not going to get you anywhere where you want to go to have a peaceful, wonderful, joyous, happy life. It's just not going to happen, right? So, yeah, they can go to firewalkadventures.com. That's our website. and they can get a hold of me. We haven't put up anything yet of Operation Do No Harm. We're in the development stages of that right now. I've got a couple corporations that are coming in, and they're saying, Dave, we want to help you with this. We'll bring you into our corporate headquarters. Let's sit down. Let's mind map this. Let's go after it, because this is what needs to be done. This could easily go viral, and they want to help me do that. So, but that doesn't mean that you can't help at some other level. We're going to be doing these events all over the country, and so we're going to need help at every level. So, if they want to get a hold of me and have a conversation, I'm all in. I'm fully committed. What's that joke? When you're having breakfast, the chicken's involved, the pig's committed. Right? So I'm all in, and I'm fully committed. That's for sure.
Well, when you come up to the Northeast, I know where you can find some volunteers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've done them all. We've done them all over the country, all over the world. So, and I also have an academy. I should probably throw that out there. Once a year in October, I train what I do. So companies can send their people, or an entrepreneur, a business owner, a trainer, or a coach. They can come up here to the Appalachian Mountains. It's a 5.5-day intensive. So I show them how to do all this. I show them the board break and the brick break and the arrow break and the rebar bend and the fire walking and the glass walking, and how to set yourself up, and how to get involved with the Chamber of Commerce's, and how to deal with fire marshals, and how to do all of it. So that way we train them, I certify them, and then they can go back, and they can go back into their respective companies or businesses and create these life-changing paradigm shift experiences on their own. And the other nice thing about that is, like this last October, we graduated 11. And so now they're out there, right? So when we get into a place, they've already been to the academy, and so they'll come and help. And they're already doing that, which is pretty phenomenal. So I want to thank my great friend, Matt Schaup, for bringing that to my attention, who said, you ought to run an academy, dude. And so we did one last year, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So that's on the website as well. There's a tab there that says the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. They can click on that. And again, I only do it once a year. I bring in approximately no more than 18 people, because we keep it small and intimate. And so I think we have 5 spots left for the October event in 2024.
Very nice. All right. Well, Dave, we want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today and telling your story. You are a phenomenal storyteller. I felt like a passenger this whole time just listening to you, because it was so engaging. So we really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Without you guys, I can't do it. Podcast, because you guys do all the work. I just get to come on here and run my pie hole, right? You guys are behind the scenes doing all the editing and doing all the work and doing all the stuff. So, believe me, man, thank you for having me on. It really means a lot to me.
All right. Yeah, this was awesome, Dave. Thank you so much. I'm fired up. Pun intended. Let's go get it.
Let's do it, man. Let's roll.
All right. Thanks again, Dave. And to everybody, be well until next time.